Hello boys and girls. Today you're going to be taking notes on equivalent fractions. For me this is on my page 16 and I've already set it up. Make sure you add that as well to your table of contents, 4-1 equivalent fractions and the page number that matches your book. If you need to pause the video to go ahead and do that, do so now. I'm going to continue on. So when we're talking about equivalent fractions, we need to make sure to use the property of 1 to make equivalent fractions. Use the property of 1. Property of 1. For example, 1 over 1 is 1. 2 over 2 is also 1. 3 over 3 is also 1. To make equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions are fractions that are equal to each other. So let's do an example. Example A. 2/5. If I want to find an equivalent fraction for 2/5, and I want that fraction to be some number over 15. So my denominator is going to be 15, but my numerator is unknown. You multiply, because we're getting bigger from 5 to 15, so we're going to multiply by 1 to change the denominator. Change the denominator. And we're going to change it to 15 because that's what's already here. So when we're working towards this problem, what we're actually doing, 2/5, and we're going to multiply by 1 using the property of 1, so a fraction that's going to get us to 15. So 3 times 5 is 15. So what I'm doing is I'm multiplying 3 over 3, and that's going to get me 15. 5 times 3 is 15. 2 times 3 is 6. Because once you find the denominator, you multiply the numerator by 1 to find the equivalent numerator. So in both of these examples, we're multiplying to get the numerator and the denominator. Okay, let's take another look at this. So if you have 2/5 and you want to create an equivalent fraction where 15 is the denominator, what you've probably been taught to do is say 5 times 3 is 15. So 2 times 3 would be 6. But now you know when you were doing it because of the property of 1. Okay, another way to create equivalent fractions is to divide. So let's look at that method. Example B. And in this example, let's say I have 16 over 24. and I want to divide to find an equivalent fraction. So I'm going to divide by 1. To change the numerator, and the denominator. So where I was multiplying before, now I'm dividing. Okay, so I'm going to be dividing by 8 over 8. That's going to be my 1, 8/8. So let me rewrite this problem where I have some space. 16 over 24. And I'm going to be dividing by 1, and I'm going to choose 8 over 8 to be my 1. And then when I solve it, 24 divided by 8 is 3. 16 divided by 8 is 2. And so my answer is 2/3. Here is my property of 1. So I'm dividing by 1. So let's take another look at that one. When you take 16 over 24 and you want to divide to find an equivalent fraction, I could divide 24 by 8, and that would get me 3. I could divide 16 by 8, and that would give me 2. When you're dividing fractions, you can divide to put them into simplest form. So let's add that word to our notes. Simplest form. I'm going to use my highlighter because this is an important term to know. Simplest form. Okay, so simplest form, a fraction is in simplest form. A fraction is in simplest form when the only factor the numerator and denominator have in common is 1. So simplest form, a fraction is in simplest form when the only factor the numerator and denominator have in common is 1. Here's an example of that. 5/12. The numerator 5, if I list all the factors out, is just 1 and 5. The factors for 12, if I were to list them out, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. Those are the factors of 12. The only thing they have in common is a 1, and that is it. So 5/12 is in simplest form. Let's look at another example. 14 over 28, 14/28. If we list out all the factors of 14, we would get 1, 2, 7, and 14. If we list out the factors of 28, we would get 1, 2, 4, 7, 14, and 28. They have several factors in common. Not only do they have 1 in common, but they have 2 and 7 in common. So this fraction is not in simplest form. Okay, so if we want to use division to write a fraction in simplest form, we have to follow another process. So example C. Let's put 24/30ths in simplest form. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to divide by a common factor. (24/30ths) can be divided by 2. They both are even numbers, therefore they have 2 as a factor in common, so I could divide 2/2. And when I do that, I get 12/15. Now, 12/15, 12 and 15 still have factors in common, so this is not in simplest form. So you need to continue dividing by common factors until the numerator and the denominator have no more factors in common. So you have to continue dividing by common factors until the numerator and the denominator have no more factors in common. So let's rewrite that problem. 24/30ths, I divided by 1, which was 2/2, and I got 12/15. I can further divide and continue dividing. They both have 3 as a factor. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 5 and 4 do not have any factors in common. They only have 1 in common. So my answer is in simplest form. Okay, this has been a lesson on equivalent fractions, how to multiply by 1 to get equivalent fractions, and how to divide by 1 in order to get equivalent fractions, and then how to put those fractions in simplest form when you're dividing. Make sure you bring your completed notes to class tomorrow, and don't forget the quick quiz. Have a good evening.